Hello, welcome. Hi everyone. Welcome to this little holiday stream for and sort of deep dive into GraphView. I've been thinking about this the past couple of days, and it's probably going to need to be more than one stream because there's just so much to cover. So that might happen here. I'm not quite sure how far we'll get in today's stream. We'll probably go for a couple of hours, but yeah, firstly, hello. Let me know in chat where you guys are watching from today. I hope you've had a good holiday period. Yeah, we'll get started very soon. I've just been setting some scenes up and getting some things prepped. What I've decided we're going to do is, because I think it's the best way to showcase the tool that we're going to build, is to basically just do some visual scripting and build a visual scripting tool, because that kind of has the demands and lacks any prerequisites that may need to exist. But I'll show you some of the use cases of what GraphView API can do. And you know, visual scripting is just one example of something that we're going to be able to do today. So who we got? We got people from Egypt, Canada. Hello, fellow Canadian person. Romania, Morocco, Brazil, Trinidad and Tobago, Israel, and the UK. So a whole plethora of people watching. Thank you very much. I'm aware that it's probably quite late where some of you are. And we got France as well, Netherlands. So global, all over the world. That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, hopefully we'll get through enough today that this sort of whole video can give at least a basic understanding of how GraphView works and how you can use it to build node-based editors in your projects, because it's kind of a hidden secret in Unity, but it's extremely powerful. And as an example, let me show you one of the things that I've been building. So ignore this. This is going to be our little demo scene that we're going to build into. But I showed this off in the last stream, so if some of you were there, you'll know kind of what this is. But for Cabs of Chaos and just in general, something I've been playing around with for a while is I've actually been using GraphView to create my own node-based geometry editor, like procedural geometry. So I can make a bunch of points, for instance, a point grid of, say, sort of 3 by 3 by 3. And well, that doesn't actually seem to be, oh, that's the distance. Okay, I can make a 3 by 3 by 3 grid. There we go. Okay, and then I can now create a thing called mesh onto points. I can hook my points into here. I'm going to create a cube as well. We'll put that in there, and then we'll throw this into here. And now I currently have a series of cubes that I have procedurally thrown onto a grid, and I can play around with the grid size and make changes to that. I can move the distance between everything. I can change the size of the cube if I want to. And so it's a little horrible no material object. Let's add a little standard material to that so we can, what is it, default Unity call it? Default, nope, that's not going to work because we are in, we're in frickin' something. These are URP, aren't we? We're inside a URP. Okay, well, any of these work? Maybe? Yeah, cool, that'll do. All right, yeah, this is a very somewhat, this is me just off the top of my head. There's most of this stream. I've got a plan for it, but things may go horribly wrong because game dev. Anyway, as you can see, it's quite cool that you can do things just with like mesh graphs. And obviously if you've GraphView tools. So if you've used shader graph or you've used VFX graph, they're two sort of quite different tool sets, but they're doing the same thing and they're using the base API. So one of the coolest things about it really is that you can kind of build whatever you want. So in the past I've built a sort of behavior tree system. I've built like a complete event sequencing tool for one of my games. And yeah, as you can see, it can do sort of geometry node based things. So really, the key component about this tutorial that we're gonna go into really is to try and understand just the general concept rather than a specific implementation. So please don't get tied up too much into what I'm implementing in this sort of series, in these sessions, because that's kind of not the point. So I'm gonna intentionally be quite vague, or I may skip over some of the actual implementation details in terms of what it's doing, because that's not kind of the important part. It's more just getting it to execute code, and how we navigate through the graph tools to do the thing that we want to do is really the sort of key component here. So essentially, we are going to build a little visual scripting tool today, because that's just the easiest thing, because we can hook into a bunch of Unity's components rather than a bunch of prerequisites that would need to exist, or a bunch of mesh data manipulation stuff. I mean, I thought about completely redoing this mesh graph tool that I just showed you, but I think it would take too long with the boilerplate of like doing stuff like that. So what we're going to do, we're going to start by essentially just building out the base functionality so that we can create nodes, and then we'll create the sort of runtime components into how that's going to work. So essentially, this is a little bit of an overview of how the whole thing is going to function. So in general, and this may not be the only way to do it, this is the way that I do it, just as a aside, I tend to build some kind of runtime controller component in my project. So something that I want to take node data and then manipulate that node data to be executed, right? And the node data is usually on a component or on a scriptable object. And again, that's going to totally depend on the use case. So for the mesh graph, because it tends to be on a component by component basis, I've built it's on a physical mono behavior, all the data and management there. But for other tools, sometimes it's just baked into a scriptable object. So if it's like a mission or a sequence or something that I know I'm going to be using multiple times, or just want access to in the project directly rather than in a specific scene, then I'll bake that into a scriptable object. Or if I want to build a macro, which we probably won't get to today, but maybe in a future episode, yeah, I'll do it that way. So yeah, that's kind of the general overview. So it goes into a scriptable object, and then that data also has a bunch of flow information about how to move between the nodes, and all of that then gets manipulated through the editor graph tool, which is what we're going to build today. But the interesting fact is that the flow information and nodes are sort of runtime classes, and then using attributes, when we open up the graph, it reads those attributes and understands how to build the graph. So we're not actually building separate sort of runtime and editor code. We're using attributes and reflection to manipulate and present that data in a user-friendly format, right? Ultimately, it is just a list of nodes in and I can show you this. If we look at the my mesh graph tool that I've built, you can see it's a very nice sort of display, but none of that is all of that is being derived from the actual mesh graph sort of component itself, which is this one here, and it's just a list of nodes with GUIDs and then specific information, and we're using serialized references to do that. And each node is a different thing, and then it gets instanced onto the graph, and then the graph connections also get baked into the data, and that will tell us how to flow through the graph. So in this instance, the graph flows in a right to left. So we actually start at the output node, and then we fetch data from this port here, which then goes to this node. And so the flow is however nodes flow in that direction. But obviously some other nodes can flow top to bottom, left to right. It really depends on what you want to do. But for fetching data, there's a sort of right to left paradigm that exists there. So I'll probably answer a lot of your questions towards the end. So by all means, ask them and I'll scroll back through questions. But I'd rather just sort of breeze through this rather than stop every few seconds answering questions. But just based on there's all sorts of implementations you can do, and it's really going to depend on your project as to what you want to do. So the goal here is to kind of show you potentially what can exist, and then it's up to you to play around with it, and whether it's a good fit for your project. You know, for me, this mesh graph tool is incredibly useful because I can very rapidly prototype and iterate on things that I want to for certain procedural elements. But in other instances, that's useless, and I need to be in Blender making things, right? And same for visual scripting tool sets or event sequencing. Sometimes that's going to make sense in the context of your game. Sometimes you want to build a behavior tree. Other times you may want to script that. So yeah, so like I'm not going to get tied down into the details of actual execution today. I'm just going to show you how you would construct a visual scripting / graph view tool. And you know, if you wanted to make your own shader graph tool, you could do that with this in theory, right? So it's really just previously, I think a lot of, you know, a lot of tools, I think Amplify Shader Editor uses its own GUI set to build a graph view because it existed before graph view was kind of a thing. However, you know, I think graph view being around is just, it's so cool, but it's marked as experimental, and it's like internal as Unity, so they don't recommend you use it. But like you know, if you're using Unity regularly, you're constantly hacking it to do things you want it to do. So just be aware that it's an experimental package, but it's been marked experimental for like 5 years now. They will eventually replace it with, I think, a graph tool foundation is what they've been working on. But again, that's been something they've been working on for a couple of years now. So who knows when that will arrive? As soon as that arrives, I'm sure I'll be looking into it because I use these sort of tooling every day. Yeah, so without further ado, let's dive into it. I'm just gonna have a sip of my coffee. It got cold quite quickly last stream, so I'm going to drink it. Okay, so yeah, let's switch over. I'm gonna probably be referencing, I'm probably gonna have to open a lot of this stuff because it's been a long time since I've built one of these from scratch. So I'm actually gonna just jump in and open the code for this on my other screen. And I will be going back and forth a little bit because, like I said, it has been a while. But for this tool specifically, I've actually used assemblies and I've got it built into a sort of project that I can import into things. So editor, I want to just open up the script so but yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll go through some questions. I'll go through questions towards the end of the stream, and I can sort of try and answer them more directly. And we'll do like a bigger Q&A. So if you still have questions by the end, by all means, ask them then. Feel free to keep asking during the chat, obviously, but hopefully some of the questions will be answered as we move through this. So, okay, right. Well, let's go to our little demo scene. I'm also going to have this demo scene that we built today up on Patreon for anybody that is in the packages tier up there. So you can look at it afterwards and dive into the code that we've been building today. So that will be available. So feel free to head over there if you are a member of the Patreon and you're watching this after the stream. So links below for ways to support the channel if you're interested in. Anyway, right. So let's get started. I think for this instance, what I think I want to do, because this is going to be a visual asset, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake everything into scriptable object, because I think that's also probably a more useful way to do things. So I think for the goal of this, let's just get the cube to move, right? Let's just by the end of this stream, let's build some nodes and get the cube to move. And depending on what time it is, maybe we'll do some more there. But like, there's so much boilerplate in setting this whole system up that, again, the implementation isn't super important to me right now. And then we can maybe do some more complex things in the next stream. But I think I'd rather just show you the setup and like get something to function so you can understand how that works. So yeah, let's get stuck in. So I see some of you saying you maybe want to use this for like a dialogue tool. absolutely what I would use something like this for, because it's great for like narrative management and stuff. Really, really useful for that. So I highly recommend this. So all right, well, we're gonna start with we're gonna make 2 sets of folders. We're gonna make we'll start with a scripts folder. Clean code. Clean project organization is still important. We're gonna make an editor folder. Feel free, it's gonna be a visual scripting tool. Feel free to come up with some names for the tool in the chat while I set this up, because it's always cool to have a name for things. My mesh graph tool is called mesh graph. Pretty on the nose. We could call this script graph. That might be what I end up going with, unless some of you come up with some much better names, which I'm sure you can. So feel free to leave some comments for our prototype visual scripting graph tool that we're about to build. I would love to see some of your suggestions. Okay, so Graphy McScripty, I like it. Blueprints in Unity, that is also it's a bit on the note. I mean, it would be quite funny. Vizbox, I like that. Vizbox, that's cool. Globe graph after Game Globe was a sad thing. It went out. Okay, just call it Dustin. That would be pretty good. Code graph. I like code graph. Okay, all right. Code graph might be where we go here, because I think that's so like. I like code graph. I think I'm gonna go with code graph. Graph. Also very good. But let's go code graph. It's on the nose. It's exactly what it does on the tin. Node craft is also quite good. Yeah, okay. Let's go with code graph. I like that. It's nice and straightforward. Right. So, all right. Well, in that case, then what we're gonna do is I called this script because I was too busy looking at chat. So this should be runtime. Okay. Well, just to be nice and tidy, because if this is going to end up in a project that people are downloading, I'm gonna actually make an assembly definition. So let's create an assembly definition, and it's going to be called code graph .editor, and watch as adding assembly definitions screws up this entire tutorial, because I always screw them up. If you haven't seen, if you don't use assembly definitions, I did make a video on it a while back now, but they're great. So you should be using them, because they segment your code up into nice little chunks, and also they make sure that you can do things inside of the package manager and like put code inside of the package manager for you to use for yourself. So pretty great. Okay, so we'll go into the editor, assembly definition, and then we will go into here and flag the editor, and then that should be good for that one. But we also need to have a reference to code graph, because it's the editor version, and it's going to want to grab stuff from the runtime, and then the runtime one we just need to flag as. Wait, did I exclude the editor? I did exclude the editor. Let's unflag that. Oh man. All right, deselect that, hit editor. There we go. That is the most annoying and incredibly confusing thing, because it changes from any to exclude, and it's Unity, why do you do this to us? Okay, and then we can exclude the edit. No, this is fine. It can be included in the editor. We need it included in the editor. Okay. So let's start with our object, our scriptable object. So we'll go C# and we will make a code graph data. Code graph data? Code graph graph? I could just call it code. Maybe I'll just call it code graph graph. Is not. I mean, that's what it is. It's a code graph graph. Code graph asset. Yeah, all right, I like that. Okay, let's go with code graph asset. That is that is a better solution, less confusing. Code graph space. Okay, open this up. I'm on my other screen looking at how I did everything for my mesh graph, just so you're aware. That's going to happen a fair amount. I may be copying and pasting some code too, just to save some time here. But for now, we're good. Okay, so code graph asset. We can't do much just yet because we need to create the sort of concept of a graph node, but that might be the next thing we do. So one of the things that we're going to be using a fair amount here is a bunch of sort of inheritance and reflection and all these kind of things. So hopefully you are keyed into some of that stuff, but if it's a little bit confusing or whatever, flag it as a question and I'll try and we'll do a little review session at the end and I'll try and go over some of the things that maybe I've skipped over or has been somewhat confusing. So all right, so I think that's good. Do we want to add a namespace? I think we should probably namespace this stuff too, just in case. And make this a scriptable object, and then create an asset menu. So menu name equals code graph. Oops. This is where I switch my keyboard language. Growing up in the UK, I'm so used to using UK keyboards, and so I'm constantly switching between them depending on if I need certain certain things or not. But it gets very confusing. Code graph slash space there slash new graph. There we go. That'll do it. So let's create an empty code graph from scratch. Let me also, just because I like doing this, see if I can grab an icon real quick. I should have prepared this bit beforehand. I apologize for that one. But I'll be quick. Well, search node. Now, by the way, if you've never used Noun Project before, highly recommend it. It's a small fee for a very large selection of excellent icons. You just like search for what you want and you get these just like incredible selections. Add a namespace to the assembly definition. Yes, I should do that actually. That's a good idea. I will do that in a second. All right, let's have a look at this. Oh, it's a hello, Jason. Hi, Jason. Welcome. Good to see you. All right, I'm just gonna pick one randomly. That's good. I like that. That's fine. That'll do. Let's not waste a whole bunch of time here. But let's make it a little bit better. Let's grab a little background. Let's just go black on white. Sure. Should we go rounded? Circle? Rounded? Rounded. Cool. Okay. Download that. That. But. Cool. Okay. And then I'll throw this into Unity. Okay. Let's make another folder. Nope, I'm in mesh graph. There we go. That's probably gonna happen a lot. Create a new folder. Ones. Set this as a. Oh yeah, I like that a lot actually. Okay, where are the Where are the import? Am I in debug mode? Nope. Where are the import settings? What the hell, Unity? There we go. Brilliant. Good job, Unity. Well done. You did it. Jesus. Okay, 2D and UI. Why? Actually, I think you can just use editor GUI. Set it up so it's nice. All right. And then we go scripts, go to code graph asset, and then make that the. Now that will show up as our icon anytime we make one. Okay, and then I'm also going to do the excellent suggestion of making the namespace. Code graph. Did I make it code graph? I did. That. Jason, you're famous in the chat. Okay, and then let's apply it already. Cool. And let's do code graph dot editor. All right. Apply that there. Cool. Okay. Right. Okay. Little bit of housekeeping there, just to make things look a little bit nicer. And then we'll create. Screw it. Let's just create a thing called code graphs, and that can be our create code graph, new graph. Yeah, there we go. Okay. The practice that I tend to use for a lot of my work is to use some kind of naming convention. I've spoken about this before, so I'll use code graph, or I would do CG. I might do CG, and then underscore, and then the name of it thing. It's just so that, like, if you want to find something faster, obviously you can do type.codegraph or whatever, but like if you're using a shorthand, when you're in the search window, you just type that shorthand and it will come up. So when you're working on teams, it's really, really valuable to do things like that. So highly recommend it if you're not doing it already. Okay, so now we need to do a couple of things. We need to start building out our editor window. We want to make it so that you can open the code graph by either double clicking on the asset or by clicking a little open button or something on the asset too. And then we've got to fill it with all this data. So there's, like I said, there is a lot of boilerplate up front to get this stuff to work. I also realized that I'm probably quite small in the code side of things. I do realize that, like, you probably can't see my screen super well, but changing the resolution on this monitor is kind of a pain in the ass. So sorry. hopefully you can kind of understand. Hopefully you understand Unity well enough to know what I'm doing. But I also hope that if you're looking at this full screen, it's probably more visible. But apologies for that one. I'll try and figure out a better solution for rendering things. I wish Unity does Unity have a like render the UI at a different resolution setting? If that does exist, let me know and I can maybe change that instead. But yeah, okay. So right, what's the best order of operations here? Probably to build out the window first, and then we can we'll start on one end. We've got one end on this side started, and we've got one end on this side started. Let's kind of meet in the middle. So let's start by making a graph view editor panel that we can then use to open this kind of content, and then we can define our nodes. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to go. So display scaling. Unity has UI scaling and preferences. Okay, let's do that. That might be useful to do. Preferences. It's UI scaling. There it is. Okay, use default. No. So if I set this to 150, changing this requires a restart. Oh. All right, I'll set it to 125. And then I guess I'll have to restart Unity. So let's do that real quick. Say, because I realize it's kind of invisible. Yeah. Again. Graph view. I'll just get this set up again. You don't want to see this all loading up and stuff. That's not fun. Graph that up again. Okay, yeah, this is much better. All right. There we go. Hopefully you can see things a lot easier now. Cool. All right, noted. I will make sure that the next stream we do, it's just already at this resolution by default. Apologies for that one. Good job, Unity. You actually did something right for once. Cool. Okay. Okay. Right. So let's start by making an editor window. So in the last stream, I spoke about a bunch of UIToolkit stuff. And so I'm not going to go over what we're doing in UIToolkit because I kind of hope that you've seen that. But also, we're not going to be using the UI builder. I'm going to be doing any UIToolkit coding entirely in editor in Visual Studio, because that's just what I'm used to. And also I find it much faster when it comes to doing node graph stuff, graph view stuff. And yeah, it's just way easier to deal with. So that's going to be the difference. You get to see how to do sort of code-based UI elements work today. I think I can close this for now. I just needed it to build up my little like test scene here. So all right, let's jump in and make our editor window. So create sharp script. We actually need to do two things. We need to create an editor window and then an editor view. So code graph editor window, and then let's make another script. Oops. Well, cool. Just go ahead and compile. No, node graph, like graph view is built on top of UIToolkit. So like you have to use visual element like stuff. That's kind of the whole thing. So it is part of the package. Code graph. Yeah, I was talking about this in the last video I was doing, the last stream. I do find I actually like over the past few months I have, especially doing UIToolkit stuff inside of the editor and especially inside of code for this like example. I don't mind it too much. It's just a little gnarly at runtime, but they're getting better at that. And I think over the next few years, it's going to be really useful. The one update from last week's stream that I have found is actually the sort of transition system. I actually kind of like it because you can kind of just use modular class elements to make transitions happen on just sort of normal objects like buttons, and using the pseudo states and stuff. Just that sort of inherently working is actually really nice and adds for a lot of reusability in many places in your UI. So once you've kind of done it once, it just kind of works moving forward. And so again, like a lot of these new systems seem to be a lot of boilerplate up front, and then it kind of just works, which I'm always a fan of, doing a load of work up front and then it just being really easy from that point forward. So that's kind of how I like to work anyway. And as you see in this video, it's a lot of boilerplate up front, but eventually you'll be able to do something where you can just make a node class and it will just work in this view. And that's one of the biggest benefits of doing this, is you can just create like a single script and it just sort of functions. So, right, editor window, editor, sure. And then let's go here. I think we basically just need to instance the. So we need to get a code graph asset. And we'll do this properly. M underscore current graph, and go. I mean, you're not gonna be able to open this with. Okay, so right on inspect. Nope, mind. I don't think I need to do that. Wait. Ah, right, I see. Hold on. I'm in the wrong place here. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, we want to go public. That's for the actual editor script that we need to do. Let's make a call to open the window, and we will pass in a code graph asset. We'll just call it target. That will then get set when we create our graph. I tend to like putting sort of static things above and then private sort of the inherited stuff here. Right, and then we also want to create. Want to serialize this reference. Wait, field, and then want to create a function that will draw the graph. So we need to make a graph view. Underscore current view. Probably just call it view, but whatever. We don't really need to serialize this, but we will anyway. And should I get a reference to the object? Yeah, I should probably make it serialized. Okay, so we'll do. Then we can pass the object in. Okay, yeah, let's do this. So we'll go private serialized object. Serialized object. And then what we'll do is when we open it, we will let's find so what I like to do here is I like to find anything that's already open and either check to see if you've already got the graph open, so we're not like making a whole bunch of graphs, or then focus that graph instead if it's already open. So that's kind of what we'll need to do. I could do this a little bit later, but I may as well do it now while I'm here and I'm looking at the other code anyway. So let's go code graph editor window, grab a list of those called windows, do resources dot find objects of type all, and then code graph editor window, and we'll go through each of them. Window in windows. Sorry, I apologize for my extremely clacky keyboard. I'm sure that's fun. If window dot, I probably actually need to make this public. No, you know what I do? I'll make a separate public graph set current graph. Just make a getter for that. Window current graph equals target. Then focus that window, baby, and return. Otherwise, make a new window. So code graph editor window equals create window. Editor window. Type of code graph editor window. This is so it can like snap next to automatically dock, which I like to do. So if there's like already a code graph editor window, it just docks next to that. Otherwise, just dock it next to the scene view, because I don't like things just opening. Oh, this is okay. Fine. fine. You can just be W. And then we'll go window.titleContent equals new GUI content. And then we'll grab the name. So we'll do window.name. Oh no, target.name. And then that. And then let's grab the icon from the asset using object content. Oops, null type of a code graph asset dot image. Oh, wait, hold on. There, dot image. There we go. Boom. Okay, and then we'll do window.load. We'll create a load function just in a second, and we'll load that asset. So we go public void load. Grab this. And then we will set that. So current graph equals target. And that should be good for now before we actually draw the graph, because we need to do some other work before we can get that working. But maybe we can add a yeah, okay, well we need to add a visual element. Okay, so we'll do that, right? So let's go draw graph, and then we'll create the serialized object. And this is just so we can like save things more easily and pass things around. Create that from the graph. Oops, m underscore current graph. And we'll make a new view. So we'll go m underscore current view equals new code graph view. We may have to now go and edit the code graph view to get this to work. But what we want to do is to the root visual element of this window, because everything in, I think 2022 forward uses, is being drawn in UIToolkit now. So you can just add things. You can add and then the current view. But that is not going to work for now because we need to go and make the graph view object actually a graph view. So let's do that. So let's open up code graph view and then change it to graph view. And that should have imported the graph view, and that should have cleaned up this. Okay, good, right. That was a lot, but it's basically just making an editor window. It should be pretty trivial to anybody who has done that in the past. Let's see, hopefully that's all good. My neighbor has just texted me. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Right. So UIToolkit's approach to editor tooling is really good. I love the built-in inspector thing too. Yes, yeah, that's going to get some use a little bit later as we try and like style things. That's my favorite thing to do, is just open it up and play around, and then you get the style that you want, and then go from there. So okay. So what should we do next? I guess we can probably build some of the view without needing to do anything else. I think we can start building. We can at least get it to look like we want. There's a lot of moving pieces here. Okay, let's add a grid background and see. Well, we should. Okay, first thing, we should check it actually we'll open a window. That's probably the best place to start. Oops. Right. Okay. Let's go. Oh, I need a way to open it. Okay. All right, that's what we should do next. We should write an editor for, which is what I was doing. I was looking at the wrong script a minute ago. So what we want to do is we want to make a little button and add support for double clicking and opening this test asset. So there's nothing in it, but we want to be able to open these assets because otherwise they are useless to us. So let's do that. So let's create a code graph asset editor. Okay. And then I may have to look. I can't remember how I did the double click. I'll have to have a look at that. I think it's in another project. I don't think I have that support in MeshGraph yet. So I will have a quick look. Supporting. So we want to create editor, and we want to create a custom editor. Oh, let's import. Do I need to add this to? No, I can just do that. Oh, yeah, right. There we go. UT editor.editor. Okay, and then custom editor type of code graph asset, and then override on inspector GUI. Should be fine. We can just do if GUI button layout dot button set. I mean, I still write default GUI stuff because sometimes it's just easy. Edit or open. Let's go open. And then we just call code graph editor window open, and then code graph asset target. There we go. And that's my dog barking at somebody. She's being defensive. Cool. I think that's all we need to do for now. Yep, that should at least get us to be able to open this. I'll have a quick look in a second about how I can get it to. So that should now open up a window that we made. Yes, it did. Okay, cool. And if we go into the debugger, we should be able to select that panel, the graph editor window, and we should be able to see that there is a graph view component in. There is. Cool. Great. We're nearly there. No, we're not. We've still got loads to do. But we're making some progress in building out this tool. Okay, so how are we doing for time? We're doing well. Okay, yeah, we'll probably go for another hour. So I may not get that much done in this stream, but we'll do a couple of these moving forward, and by the end of them, we'll have a full thing. Maybe we'll just keep going. We'll just build a full visual scripting tool that we can sell on the asset store. Who knows? We just got to be better than Bolt. Okay, so let's move on to just quickly adding a little background to our graph editor here. And yeah, that's probably the best place to start. So right, code graph view, and let's build this out. So public code graph view. We just want to pass the object into it. So the serialized object. object. And fine for now. And then let's make a reference to that here. The reason we're doing this is because all of the data that we want to draw is going to be bound by serialized properties. And so it's far easier just to pass in a serialized object than to deal with this later down the line. Because you can then just bind everything. And this is just a weird UIToolkit thing in the way that it handles data. So don't worry about it too much. It'll make sense in the future. But it's essentially how we can make the view update the data. So from there, should be fine for now. And that's probably a good place to start. So we'll go m_serialized object equals object. And then let's add a background. Grid background. Background. New grid background. Let's name it. Because we're about to get into USS, baby. Equals grid. I think just has a default style. Background.grid. Background.name. Grid. Add background. Then we need to go back to window and pass in the serialized object and go from there. So ideally, now have a. I have to open this again, or we do have one, but it's probably not styled. Let's find out. Get very familiar with the UIToolkit debugger because you are going to need it a lot. It's very, very good at. I really like the debugger. It's very good. It's excellent at telling you all the information you need to know. Okay, we have a grid background, and we now just need to set the colors. So does it just need to background.send to back? Is that what I need to do? Maybe that's what I need to do. Or is it just that the colors are all the same? They are. They're just all the same, right? Yeah, okay. Grid background color. Okay. I'm going to just steal the styling that I was using before. So, okay. Let's style that out. So let's create a. Do I put this in the editor? Yeah, I guess it's technically editor. Create folder. I'm just gonna make a USS. Create toolkit. Oh sheet. Code graph editor. Then here, let's open code graph editor.uss. Rid of that. Then let's grab. I'm just grabbing the style that I took from mesh graph. So code graph view will grow. Oh, that's probably why. And then we'll set it to background color of whatever that is, and a slightly darker line color, or slightly lighter line color. Should, if, oh, well, we also need to add the USS to the view. So let's do that. So let's grab the style sheet and style asset database dot load asset path. Do I need to put this in? No, I can just type it in. Okay. Assets / script / editor. Editor / USS code of editor.uss. Style. Style sheets dot add style. Cool. Does that change anything? Did I screw up? I may have screwed up. Find out. Oh, yeah, no, doesn't look like that's working. Man, this might be a send to back situation. It might be my fault and did not add that piece of code, but I should stop closing the debugger. I don't know why I keep closing the debugger. The UIToolkit. But let's just keep it there because we're gonna need it. Also, we don't need to see the main thing. We can just let's do this. All right, UIToolkit debugger. Oh. Okay. Something has forked that. Close that. There we go. Okay, sometimes that happens. You have to kind of reload. I think I need to set this to UIToolkit live reload or not. No, don't do that. Okay. Yeah, no idea what's going on there, but there we go. Okay, so we have our graph. We need to make sure that we can move around the graph now, and that we can drag things and select things. So that's actually really easy. You can sort of add functionality to things inside of visual elements by just using these things called manipulators. And we can just paste these manipulators, which is a content dragger, a selection dragger, a rectangle selector, and a click selector. And with those enabled, that should allow us to move around, although I may have to set up some other stuff. But I think, there we go. So you can't quite see this probably. I think the, maybe if I make the lines thicker. But yeah, there's now some more functionality in here, so we can like drag things and move things around. And it is moving. There'd have to be nodes for you to really see that this is moving around, but that is what you can do. So we have the basis of being able to place some nodes inside of a graph. We have a graph ready to go. So that's great. We are getting closer. Cool. All right, just let me have a swig of drink. It's subtle but noticeable. Okay, cool. You can see that. Great. Okay. Let's keep going. What's the next? What should we do next? I think we need to create the concept of a node. Honestly, I think like we just need a node that we can add to the graph. It doesn't need to do anything, but we probably need to start with a node. If this is going to be a flow graph, we need a start node. So that's probably the best place to start. So let's make, we're going in deep, folks. Let's make a series of nodes. Okay, so there's, like I said, I'll go back to my little view here. There are two components to this. There's the runtime controller, which we're gonna build shortly when we actually want to add functionality. We may not get to that today. I kind of only have an hour left to do this, unfortunately. But we might do this in a second stream. But we've got a node data. We've got the node data, which we've started working on, and the flow information, which we'll also hopefully be able to do shortly. So the sort of two things we need to do are create a actual class representation of a node and then a graph representation of a node. And those are two slightly different things. So like I said, this is a huge topic, so it's going to just have to be broken up into steps. All right, let's start with a node. Let's head here and scripts, that's in code graph. So we need to go to runtime. We need to create a base node. So we need to call this code graph node. I'm going to close this. This doesn't seem to, probably the serialized data I'll look into why that's not working shortly. Code graph node, cool. Okay, so don't want it to be a mono behavior. There are a few things we need to add to get this working. So we want to we need to make this serializable. We want to add a GUID, because basically the whole thing is based on GUIDs. So it's dictionaries and GUIDs all the way down. Then we should add a position, direct, oops. And we need to give it a type name so that it serializes properly inside of the data. And then we'll just add some accesses, public string ID, and then get the GUID. And so this is the data representation of a node. And this is essentially going to be the parent object of every single functional thing we want to do inside of our graph. And so whenever we create like the start node will inherit from this, the move node, we were talking about moving the cube, the move node will inherit from this, the vector node, because we'll need to say how much to move by, the number node, etc. So everything is based off of this root parent node. And it's all serialized in the same way using references. Nope, don't make a mistake I always make, which is a cyclical reference. And it used to crash Unity, and Unity would never tell you why. So public code graph node. Whenever we make a new node, we want to assign a GUID. Let's create a. We'll make a function, because sometimes you want to make a GUID without getting new, just like inherently. So it's good to have it as. And we can just do this with mGUID equals GUID dot new GUID string, and I think that's all we need. Oh, we need to make a set position, public void set position, correct. Then we'll do. And we'll put the rest, we'll do the rest of our boilerplate a little later when we get around to functionality. Yeah, I'm not gonna worry too much about that just yet. So I think that's enough to just like get nodes going. Okay. So then what we do inside of our asset, we are going to make a list of code graph nodes. And I'm just going to call it, this actually doesn't need to be private. Instead of serialized field, you want to serialize reference, because we're never actually going to make a code graph node. Everything is going to be a child of a code graph node, much like I showed you here. All of these objects inside of this graph are types of mesh graph nodes, but they're all different. So like there's an output node, there's a point grid node, there is a this is not going to be as, you're not going to see this as well, sorry. There's a mesh onto points node, and they're all, it's so you can store its serialized data using the serialized reference attribute. So very useful. I don't know when Unity added that. It's quite a new addition to Unity to be able to do that. I think it was a couple of versions ago, but yeah, it used to be hell to be able to do something like this before, but now it's really nice because it'll just serialize nicely. So okay. Right, so Let's move on to making a start node. So what I'll actually do is I'll make a new folder called types. And let's start with create script. And let's just call it a start node. And for now, it doesn't actually need to do anything. So we're just going to make this a child of the code graph node. And that's all we need to do. That's it. The next step then is how do we get this to show up inside of our graph asset? Right? Like, how do we add a node to this? And so we have to create, we have to do a couple of things. We have to create a editor version of the node. So like a visual representation version. And then we need to create some attributes so that we can use reflection to tell that editor node how to draw itself. So let's just first start by having a node exist, like an editor node exist that we can move around and do things with. Because without that, we're kind of screwed. So yeah, let's do that. Right. Okay, so in our editor, let's create a new class called code graph editor node. And thank you for trying to be helpful, Visual Studio, but that did not help. Ooh, and then close this and close that. And then what we're actually going to do is inherit from node. And make sure that you grab from editor experimental graph view, because that's the type that we want to use. There's quite a lot of them, but that's what we need. So I don't think we need to do much here really just yet, until we start wanting to like manipulate data. But what we'll probably do is make a public code graph start and just like add a class so that we can manipulate it a little bit. So we'll call it a code graph. And then I'll do this first. Yeah, maybe. Okay. So basically we want to use attributes to determine the way in which it's going to draw itself, and also to get some information about how to draw itself. So I think that's useful, and I think maybe that's where we start, probably, because I think just adding a node to a graph, I think like the flow makes sense to just do it properly rather than in pieces. So let's do that. So let's create a thing that we're going to call node info. So we'll do this and we'll use this on our start node. So down here, we have to make sure it's in our runtime because otherwise it's not going to work. So we have to go in here and we have to create attributes because of the assembly definitions. Nope, I didn't want to do that. In here, and then we go create C# script, and we will call this a node info attribute. Hope you're like Reflection because we're about to do a whole bunch of it. Actually, it's not that much, but my search editor window video that I did a while ago actually came from some of this stuff. So node info attribute. Now I can't remember fully what I wanted to do. So I think we just want to make some data. It's just, these are just kind of like metadata tags that we give to our nodes that we can then read from. So you can kind of do anything you want with these, but this is the way that I like to filter them and also show them in a graph, like in a search window. Which again, like if you've watched the video, you should kind of understand what I'm doing here. So node title, private string, menu item. And actually, when I'm doing the search window stuff, I will probably skip over a lot of it because string title. Menu item just essentially is going to tell us where we want to put it in order, like when in our search window. String type. Oops. We probably won't worry about that today. We'll add support for it. The important part is the node title for now. When we get more nodes and stuff, we'll want to organize them. But for now, we just want to add a start node. What I'm probably going to do, but given how much time we've got before I have to head off, I'll try and get a start node going and then like a debug node so we can at least test some flow functionality. And then in the next stream, we'll add like we'll add the gamut of different node types and stuff. I think that's probably the best way to do this. Hopefully I'll be able to sort of allocate more. So, okay, that's good for that. So in our start node, we now want to add the node info attribute. We're going to call it start node. We're not really going to use this, but just in the future, we'll call this process. We'll make a process submenu and we'll call this start. Don't need to call it start node, just needs to call start. And yeah, that's probably good for that. So now what we want to do is get the node to show up in a little add node menu when I hit like space on the keyboard here. Or in a menu here. So we need to make a search provider. So in editor, go create a lot of scripts. Code graph window search provider. Basically, we're going to search for any node that has the node info. And let's open up the search provider. And we'll inherit from script object. Like I said, I have a whole video on this, so please go ahead and watch that if you're not quite sure what I'm doing. But essentially, this is just designing one of those like searchable windows. And there's just a whole bunch of boilerplate you have to do to get that to work. So that's what we're going to do right now. You have to populate the tree, the search tree, and then you have to tell it what to add when you select one. And that's kind of what we're doing. So we'll add the target element and then we'll make it a code graph. So we can add to the graph and we've selected. And so I've created a struct search context element. Screw it, let's just do that as well. And then in here, we want to create a new tree. Search tree entry, tree, new tree. And we will add to the tree the first entry, which is also the top search tree entry group. The top element is search tree group entry. This top element is always just the name, like the title that you want. So you should always just set the title of the window that comes up. Boop, level 0. That, and then we'll create a new list of elements. Oops. Did I not make elements yet? I didn't. New element. Right, and then we're basically going to search through every assembly, because what I like to add support for is maybe in different projects, you want to add nodes that are specific to that project. And so we add assembly support so that we can look through those different assemblies and the graph can work. So you can create essentially extensions to the graph by adding, you know, project-based nodes. And that's always how I like to do things, because it just adds sort of future-proofing. So we'll do that. Assembly, bring reflection in, and we go assemblies, app domain dot current domain dot get assemblies for each assembly in assemblies. And then for each type in assembly dot types. Then we if type dot custom attributes. Actually, we can probably no, we should just do that. That's fine. Doesn't equal null. And then if let's try and get the attribute. Type dot get custom attribute. Type of node info attribute. We have the attribute. We are a node. We'll grab information. Just get the attribute, and then we can build a node from that using activator.create instance type. We actually like instance that asset. Then if string.is null or empty, title.script, we can do this. att.menu item new. Otherwise, you will create a search context element. Node and then dot menu item, and that should be that for building out those. Then we'll sort them by name. I'm just gonna grab this. I don't want to type all this out. That just sorts all of the these entries by name. It's pretty straightforward. It just figures them out based on the forward slashes. And then what we'll do, again, I'm just going to boilerplate some of this because it's kind of the same thing. We'll create our actual tree that we can then return. So this just goes through based on all the titles and then builds out entries into the elements. And then it will assign, I believe that's what I did up here. Yeah, we've like actually added the node object as the user data. And so that's what we're creating here. So it grabs a new element as the user data. I don't know why that's not just the default element. Probably could just be, I don't know why we're creating new, just be the element, but it's fine. I'm not worried too much about optimizations for now. It's fine. Okay, so then when it gets selected, we want to grab the position of the mouse just so the node appears. So we're going to window mouse position equals graph dot change coordinates to graph context dot screen mouse position minus graph dot oh yeah, right, okay, that's why we had window stored position dot position. Okay, it's because of the window position, so we need to store the window. Okay, which is why that's in there. Okay, so let's go to the graph real quick, and we'll actually grab the window so we can store that. Window, we'll make a get that to save. Cool. Okay, cool. And that should now work. Yeah, cool. Okay, great. So we just stored a reference to the window. We'll need to actually go to the window and give itself in there too. There we go. So we just want to pass this, I believe. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've just passed the window through so that our search provider can use it to position the node correctly inside of the graph, essentially, and get the mouse position effectively. And then we do the same thing and then convert that into UI elements land. The graph mouse position equals graph dot content view container dot world to local, and then we pass in the window mouse position, and then we grab that element equals search context element search tree entry dot user data. Now we have that again. We can then grab the node from that data. So we can grab the code graph node equals code graph node, and we'll get the element dot target from that. Now have that. We can then set the position as the position we've just created. New rect graph mouse position, and we'll just put an empty vector 2 in there on a size because that doesn't matter right now. Oh, there we go. Then we can add it to the graph. Add node. Turn true. So we haven't actually got an add function. So we now need to add our add function so we can add the node in. So yeah, that's a lot of boilerplate. Ultimately, like I said, I've covered this in the graph view in a previous video on the channel. I'll link it below in the description if you're watching this after the stream. But essentially we've just populated a tree. That's all we've really done. So it's just a heck of a lot of code to do that, and it's really annoying. But yeah. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, it's tricky trying to write and code and speak and do things at the same time, but hopefully it's not terrible to listen to all my click clacking. Okay, let's let's write a little add function, and then hopefully we can get a node on screen and we can get our start node working. So back in our graph, nope, that's our editor window. That's our view. Cool, right? So that's what we want. Back in our graph, we then want to add our node, our functionality for adding. We'll go public void add, and then we will add our mesh graph node. Nope, no, I'm looking at my mesh graph code. Code graph node. There we go. Node. Sweet. What we'll also do is we'll just add an undo. We'll add an undo for that so we can undo it. And we'll based on our serialized object dot target object, and we'll just add a added node undo. Because undo functionality is useful. Set graph. Actually, we don't need that just yet. I'll do that in a bit. So then we need to go to we do want a reference to the actual asset itself as well, rather than just the serialized object. Okay, let's make one. I think we can just make one. That's probably fine. Yeah, we can just turn that into mesh. Okay, cool. Right, so we need a reference up here so we can just more easily add nodes to the list rather than using serialized objects and stuff. So we'll create a code graph asset reference m underscore code graph. And then in here, we will convert the target object back to code graph asset. Serialized object dot target object. Okay, there we go. And we'll do, now we can get the code graph and then grab the, I don't think it's public, nodes. It just, what's the best way to do this? I think we can just make a, yeah, I think we'll just make it public. I think that's fine. So we need to go to the asset, and yeah, instead of private, we'll make this, actually no, let's make a reference to it. Let's do this. Let's do this code graph node. Then we can't like replace the nodes accidentally. Nodes, do that. Let's do that. Okay, so what we should also do actually is instantiate that too. So back in the asset, let's make sure that, I think serializing the reference will do this anyway, but just in case, we'll just make sure that it's new, like that. And then we'll do code graph dot nodes dot add this one. Hooray. So now there's a data object. There's a data object reference to that node that we've just created. We now have to convert that into an editor node. So we're going to do that. That's the next step here. So we're then going to update the serialized object, and we'll add node to graph. So this is different as like adding the node into the object. We'll do that. It's kind of like this is like create, and then this is add it to the graph. And so here we now build our we put our info into the type name. So we do get type dot assembly qualified name, and we create an editor node. So code graph editor node equals new code graph editor node. I don't think I need to pass anything in yet. We do editor node dot set position, and that will be node dot position, and then we just need to we can add the element. And we'll make that node, editor node. The one thing we also probably want to do is make a list inside of our graph view here of all of the nodes that currently exist, because we're going to want to sort through them eventually. And so we want to build both like a node dictionary and also a so we can look them up by ID, and then also just like a list of all the nodes. So what we'll do is we'll create a public list code graph editor node, and we'll call this m_graph nodes. And we'll also then make a dictionary with a string ID, and then the I think we'll put the editor node in there. Code graph editor node. Node dictionary. Like so. And then we'll make sure to instantiate those when we create our graph. And that should do that. So we can add our graph node. Add this new editor node, and then we'll also add it to the dictionary. Add the node.id. We use the node ID, but then we'll add the editor node, like so. Okay. If this has been set up correctly, we should now have the ability to add our node, but who knows? Hello, Christina, welcome. Hi. Right, so let's grab the CG test, open this up. Oh. To add support for the search window to show up, we need to actually add support for the search window to show up. So let's do that in our view up here. I think we just have to set it as there's a couple of things you have to do to get it to show up in the graph. I think you have to create it, and then you have to create an instance of it and then set it as the thing to do. Okay, so what we want to do is create a search window. So private search provider. Yeah, okay. Provider. No, what did I call it? Code graph provider. There we go. m_search provider. Need to instantiate that as well. Scriptable object. Create instance. Search code graph window search provider. And we will set graph equals this. And then this dot node creation request equals, and we'll make a new method called show search window. Generate method. Okay. And then in here, we do the work to show the window. It's pretty straightforward actually. Is we just go m_search window search provider.target equals this element, just focus controller.focused element, and then we just open it. So search window dot open new search window context dot oops. Oh, it's called obj dot screen mouse position, and then m_search provider. There we go. Okay. That now should allow us to open our search window. Again, I covered some of this in the search window video. So if we hit space, we now have our node. I don't know if that added. I don't think it actually added anything because I probably haven't got that working properly. I'll have a look at that in a moment. But we have our graph, so that's cool. Look at that. Yeah, our little search thing. And eventually, as we add more nodes, we'll be able to type them in here, and we'll get a whole plethora of nodes. Right. So, okay. We are short on time, unfortunately. So, but I've got about another 20 minutes or so. So let's see how far we can get. And then we will have to save it for the next version. It's clearly going to break this up into multiple videos. So that's good, but also, sorry. It's like I said at the start of this, it's a very complex topic. And as you can tell, it's been a lot of boilerplate code just to get to where we are right now. But yeah, let's keep going and see how far we get in the next 20 minutes. Do we add? No, the names will now just get added based on that attribute. That was the whole point of setting up this attribute system. So as we now add more nodes, like this start node, which we can do, let's close orbit this. What we can do is actually I know I want to do this because I want to do a little debug thing. Create. So we'll make a new C#. We'll just call this a debug log node. That's probably what I want to do as part of the flow. And then open that up, make that a code graph node, and then copy the node info attribute and change this to, I don't know, debug log. Maybe make this a debug and then log message console. Debug log console thing, and now if I save that, we should be able to open this up, and there you go. We now have our debug message node in there as well. So all of that work was to set up this sort of procedural functionality so that we can just add nodes on the fly, and they should, in theory, work. We've got a little bit more work to do to get them to function and show up, but as you can see, we're building this sort of boilerplate for the it's a very sort of generic code system that uses reflection and attributes and stuff to completely define all the behavior with just a single script. So it's a lot of work, but it's quite powerful once you get it going. Okay, so for some reason we are not getting stuff showing up. And it's possible that the view, that we actually do have them in here, but I think the grid view is on top, maybe? Yes, it is, which is why they're not showing up. There are nodes in here, they're just not. Okay, that's what remember earlier when I was like, I think we need to move this to the back. That's why. So let's open up code graph view. Let's go to our grid background, and we'll go background dot center back. Okay, so now if we open this, I've messed up some of the data a little bit, so it's going to be a bit strange. But if I add a node, there we go. We have our node. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't say anything. But we have a start node and we have a debug log message and console node. So the next step then is to determine, based off of that information, what to draw. These are two very different nodes. I should be able to see those in here. They should be seen as different nodes as well. Yep, there we go. We have code graph editor node. Oh, right, we haven't set any of the information up on that yet, so they just considered a node, but they are different. So yes, the align snapping stuff is all default. It didn't. I think it's it's like a newer feature that they added. But yeah, you can like line snap. You can line and snap stuff off. You can turn it off as part of the manipulators, but I think it's just like one of the built-in default manipulators. So, okay. Yeah, right. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll get these drawing, and then in the next episode, we'll actually add the functionality, because there's a whole bunch of boilerplate we have to do for adding connections and ports and all this kind of stuff. So I think given the time we have, let's just get this to at least draw the node name and style it a little bit, and then we'll wrap up there. So if you have any questions, feel free to start adding them to the chat, and I'll answer them just before we finish off the stream here. And anything you particularly maybe want to see next time as well, let me know. So I'll carry on here and get these rendering. We'll just get it to add the title, the node, and I think maybe color the nodes potentially. Let's have a look. Let's see how far we get. But I'm going to get the title showing on the node here. So let's do that. All right. Okay. So we now want to go to our editor node, and this is where all the attribute sort of reflection stuff starts to come in. So we've successfully got things adding to the graph. We haven't quite got like loading node data up yet. In fact, if I go in here, we'll see I might have some time to add that functionality. If you go in here, we've actually added 4 nodes, but visually there's only 2. So we'll have to add that support. Maybe I'll have time to do it now, but for now I'll just clear it out every time I want to edit it. Okay, editor node. Okay, yeah, we don't really have anything in here, so we can start playing around with it. So we have our code graph node, and then what we want to do is we want to get some type info, which we get. Right, we want to actually feed the node that we're feeding in here. So code graph node. So that's the base class data. So that would be the start node or the debug log node that we're going to feed into the editor to give it all the information it needs. And we'll actually save that as an object. So private code graph node. So each node will have a reference to itself. And this can be m_graph node. Set m_graph node as the node. And then we'll grab the type info from that node. And we'll then get the attribute. Reflection, and we'll then go title equals att. I'll actually rename this to info because we're going to be using other attributes. Info.title, like that. For now, and then we'll actually name this .name equals type info.name. We will also add that as a class. Actually, no, we should be fine. We can use name references in the USS to do that. So, yeah. No, I remember what I did. Okay, so I actually go through the menu item and name them that way. So we'll iterate over the menu item info inside of the attribute, and then add a class to each one depending on that. And so that should give us, if we go into the view and we pass our node in like this, when we add a node, we should now see our gotta fix this thing, the serialization gets lost every time. But if we add a start node, we now have a start node. And if we add a debug node, we now have a debug node. So there we go. Okay, so the next step, which I think I've got some time for, which we'll do quickly, is to get these two to actually load again when we open the graph, because now if we open the graph, they're not loading. So let's quickly do that, and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll do the rest in the next stream. So, okay. Like I said, feel free to throw your questions in, and we'll go through them quickly. after I've done this. So editor node, editor window, and loads the graph. So in the view, we actually then need to load the nodes. We've already done all of that. So yeah, just probably need to load the nodes from the list, I think. So we need a draw nodes method, probably. So code graph view here, once we're, do we have a load function? No, we're putting it in. Okay, yeah, so draw nodes. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward because all of the data is stored on the node data itself. And then every time we load the graph up, we actually don't do this add function. We're just doing the add node to graph function. So it should be, he says, it should be as easy as going through each of the nodes in the code graph like that, and then just adding them again. Because we're building the graph the first time. And that should be it, actually. Now, when I open it, because we've got a start node and a end node in the data there, if we open this up, there they are, debug node, sorry. I'm now curious if I move them around, if that data gets serialized. It probably doesn't yet. I think we have to do some work to save the asset, but yeah, no, it doesn't, but it's just the initial place where they get created. But yeah, we can now add a new start node, for instance. We shouldn't allow that, but whatever, we're just playing around with things like that. Close this, open these up, and there they are. They're back where they started. Yeah, so, all right. That has been nearly 2 hours of starting this node editing. There's probably at least 2 more on the horizon to get functionality working and different support for things that we want to do. So I'm just going to save it for another stream. There may be another one after that if we want to do some more advanced things like Blackboard. There's a whole like adding support for Blackboard, macros, all that kind of thing. So yeah, this was a huge topic that I wanted to cover. And as you can probably tell, really difficult to cover in just a single video. So this was kind of my solution to that, and the best way I could think of to go through it was just this kind of stream. I've done a lot of this, so and I really enjoy it. Once I think you can start to see with the attribute system how easy it's going to be to start adding new like functionality, new features in a modular way for this moving forward. And so you can do a lot, right? And like I said, it's not about the specific implementation, but it can, if you think you would want a visual editor for a specific part because maybe you've got some designers, or just that like coding it is a pain in the butt. So for me, visual editing geometry tooling just makes sense because you can very rapidly build out different features and bind things and merge things and change different like functional stuff in a heartbeat, right? Whereas like doing this in code would just take a really long time. Whereas now I can just build modules together and add that support. So there are some very valid reasons to be using visual editors. And so I think it's really important that this stuff gets covered because it's just a really powerful feature set that Unity has just hiding in the background. And yeah, it's just kind of difficult to chat about. So we will cover the other two in the next 2 streams. Probably we'll do 1 stream, and then at the end of that, we'll figure out if we want to do another one. I'll probably do it in a couple of weeks' time. I'll make sure there's enough notice. I'll schedule it on the channel. Post holidays can be a little bit funky, so I'll try and do it. It'll probably be on a Friday because I don't work on Fridays. So I'll try and do it around the same time because that seems to be the best time for viewership. So most people are available. And yeah, so all right, let's quickly run through some questions. And see. Personally, I love the non-destructive workflow, aka building a pipeline for proc gen to pass things through. Absolutely, yeah. It's really that non-destructive element to it that like you can just procedurally do things in modular ways, and that modularity is really awesome. And kind of something that I think can very easily get looked over sometimes. So I think one of the coolest functionality, like functions you could build, and I intend to probably do it in the future, is behavior trees. For AI, if you've got some bot type things and you want them to do some basic behaviors, you can build out these behavior tree graphs that if you've got little modular blocks of code, you can handle. I think that's actually really a really powerful use of this. So how easy is it to get the data between nodes? I come from Godot's graph edit and there is quite a hassle. Yeah, so that's going to be what we go over in the next episode. We're going to talk about how we pass data around, and we're actually going to try and get that running. So we'll build the run. We're basically going to build the runtime in the next episode. We're going to build the editor functionality to have the runtime read, and then we'll add support for the runtime functionality. I remember you created a video about Bolt one time. Is it smarter to use Bolt for these systems or custom implementation? I mean, if you're doing visual scripting, just use Bolt. Like we're doing visual scripting here as an example because I don't want to have to write a bunch of functionality. But Bolt is really just for inbuilt things. Extending Bolt doesn't give you the flexibility that writing your own tool is going to do, or Playmaker or anything like that. So it's really going to depend on what you're using it for, right? For me, it's, again, this is more just about like what node-based editing can do, rather than a specific like workflow or specific implementation. I know you're gonna down the Blackboard route. How far into graph theory stuff are you gonna dive? Graph traversal, I imagine it's probably out of scope. Well, I'd like to add support for branching behaviors, and I want to add flow support so we can, maybe you don't mean this, Jason, but ultimately, so the mesh graph tool I have doesn't have any flow. It just it is just a fetcher. Ultimately, this tool has an output node, and this is where we start, and it has a variable, and it just says get. This is just a function that's called, it's like get the port that I'm connected to, get that node, and then get the information, get the mesh information, and then on this node, to build that mesh information, it does a bunch of functionality, but it's also getting data from these other things. So it's like a right to left. Whereas I think with code graph, what we'll do is we'll have an actual flow state, and we'll do the fetching of data in a similar way to this happens, but there'll be an actual start direction. So we'll have a sort of left to right direction for flow, and then a right to left direction for fetching variables. Sorry, I realized you can't actually see what I was doing there. On the screen, there we go. So yeah, this is the output information for the mesh graph tool that I'm using, so that I've built. And yeah, so it goes from right to left here, but there's no flow specific, so I can't really support branching in this. I mean, I guess I could in the way that you can in shader graph. Like it's more functional in the way that shader graph is, where it does things in a specific direction. But yeah, I mean, like node visitor patterns. Yeah, no, probably not going to go too far into that stuff. Feel free to chat to me if you want me to cover it though, and elaborate. Send me a message and we can talk about it, and maybe I can cover it a little bit. I don't like invasive solutions like Odin or Bolt. I'd rather have a simple tool that allowed me to export to C# code. Yeah, I mean, you could do that too. Like you could actually build modular, you could build a node that is like actually modularly writing things for you if you wanted. I guess that's not out of scope of what you could do with this, but yeah, it's very flexible. So I think that's kind of one of the coolest things. Muse AI has some graph behavior trees. I have no idea how that works. It seems crazy to me that these AI tools have an understanding of your code base, but yeah. All right, I think we'll probably leave it there. It's been nearly 2 hours now, and want some lunch, but oh, one last question. Okay, and for state, are you going to use task returns for state halting, as in nodes with return enum state? No, okay, yeah, so we'll go over that in the next video. Ultimately, each node will expect, it will flow through things, and each node will expect to be, at the end of a node process loop, it will return the node to move to. So the flow is going to be determined specifically that way. So yeah, there's a lot you can do, but the flow is going to be determined by the nodes ultimately, and that's it. Without showing you and going into detail about how, like, I'll probably start and show you how my Meshgraph tool works, just to give a basic understanding of how we're fetching data and moving around. But the connections will determine how we move around, and the data can work that way. So there's lots of things we can do. And yeah, and then eventually, if we get time in a later stream, I want to build into sort of macros and things like that. So, but yeah, this is one way to do it. Obviously, there's tons of ways. I really just want to showcase the API and sort of get across the basics of things you can do there. But yeah, by all means, many of you are more advanced programmers and know your stuff. So hopefully this just at least opens the door to potential. And maybe this is enough for you to get started. So hopefully let me know if you are watching this and this has sort of interested you in having a look. Please do let me know. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for today. Yeah, I'm hoping that this has aided in, as I can see, like the lack of documentation. Hopefully this has aided as a good place to start. So yeah, we'll evolve graph view, code view, code graph. I don't even remember their name of the damn tool. We'll evolve code graph over the next 2 streams, maybe one, maybe 2. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you'll have a great new year. And yeah, I'll see you in the new year. I'm probably going to do a Tabs of Chaos update video next, before the next stream. I'd like to get that out in January. Yeah, I'll upload probably tomorrow. I'll upload this package to Patreon. So if you want to grab that, the link is in the description below, but it's patreon.com/gamedevguide. If you want to support this, support the stream, links below to how to do that. Would really appreciate it. Means a lot because this stuff is long. And I've really been trying to figure out the best way to do this. So anyway, yes, thank you so much. See you all later. Have a good one. Bye.